I want to start like first, okay, if we're trying to go to 100%, very logical question to ask is what is 0%? People have been thinking about automation for much longer than I think we'd like to admit. So like back in the 12th century, the first account, this is called what's called a brazen head. Have you heard of this before? Anyone raise their hand if they're brazen head before? This was like a meme at the time in kind of liturgical writing. So the first account of a talking head used to give its owner answers to his question appears in William of Malmesbury's circa 1125 History of the English Kings. In a passage where he collects various rumors surrounding the polymath, Pope Sylvester II, who is said to have traveled to Al-Andalus and stolen a tome of secret knowledge, whose answer he was only able to escape through demonic assistance. He was said to have cast the head of a statue using his knowledge of astrology. It's like hitting every single plot point. And he would not speak until spoken to. It's like Siri. But then answered any yes/no questions. I think it's really funny. They were like, the vision of automation in 12th century is like, we have to use magic and astrology and demonic assistance, and by the way, can only answer yes or no questions. Okay, so like that's the foreground, right? Like I think we've all seen Mechanical Turk, circa 18th century. Speech synthesis, by the way, my name is Lily. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Rime. We're training speech synthesis models. Have a long history. So like how are we even like 50% over there? So like back in the 18th century, people are like, okay, we have a basic understanding of how the human vocal tract works. People are making these things called organs. These use bellows. What if we use a bellow to create a sound like human speech? Okay. 18th century, literally 20th century, it takes another 200 years to think of like what is a speech synthesizer, how would it work? And by the way, what we're dealing with here is like 4 or 5 vowels and maybe 6 or 7 consonants. So it took us like 600 years to get from myth to something that exists, and then 200 years to get from something that exists to something that can produce what we would perceive as kind of sounding like speech. And then it takes us another 10 years to like find a production use case. Okay, so like what would 75% of the way be? So I don't know, it's gone now, by the way, but it used to be the case that we were on the BART platform in the Bay Area. There were train announcements. I don't know why they got rid of them, but they used to be robotic sound. They were, in fact, text-to-speech. It was developed by Bell Labs in 1995, 1996. And it's funny, this is an article from 2009, I want to say. It turns out the synthesized voices of George and Gracie are a relatively recent addition to BART's 36-year history of service. Why an automated audio system? Question mark. Well, with dozens of stations and thousands of train arrivals every day, real live human beings just couldn't keep up with the job of voicing all those announcements. In some stations with multiple train lines coming through, there may be only 1 second between each of these announcements. And I don't know if the computer audio will share. I have a sample of this in case anyone wants to feel nostalgic.
You still have it.
I don't hear it though, day to day. It might be like station by station. I'd love to continue to hear it.
Hi, this is George. Welcome to BART's DSS audio service. My partner, Gracie, and I are the synthesized voices you hear while waiting for your train.
We only announce ETAs, train arrivals, and tell you when the train is boarding.
Here are some typical announcements. 10-car San Francisco Millbrae train in 8 minutes.
6-car Richmond train now approaching platform 1.
3-car Fremont train now boarding platform 2.
George, it's time to get back to work.
You're right as usual, Gracie. Goodbye and thanks for visiting. Say goodbye, Gracie.
Goodbye, Gracie.
Yeah, the pre-recorded demo was definitely a thing back then too. And so like, okay, again, 600 years to go from myth to something that exists, produce something that sounds like human speech. Another 200 years to get something that uses computer technology to create something that sounds basically like speech. Another 10 years kind of production use case. And right back then it was literally like, why do we even want to use this? And it's because humans couldn't do this work. So that's kind of just setting the groundwork for where we are in 2025, which is there's been an explosion in the capacity of automated intelligence in the form of large language modeling. I think, again, in many ways, the more things change, the more they stay the same. It's still very hard to build an enterprise voice application that does what people want it to do. Oftentimes, you're not just simply stitching 3 APIs together, speech recognition, LLM, and text-to-speech. At the same time, right, like this is...
And my name is Grace. Just to let you know, there's a Richmond train that's about to arrive on platform number 2.
Hey, what's up? My name's George. Welcome to BART's audio service.
I mean, the explosion in capability is quite insane. I don't think we've really like reckoned what getting from 90% to 100% will mean. And by the way, right, like a team of 10, so like Rime is about 10 to 12 people, can spin up these essentially what I would consider like toy applications to demo our speech synthesis models, where we can link via some kind of orchestration framework, again, speech recognition, large language model, and then Rime voices, and create something that, by the way, like people are talking to this on our website for like an hour at a time. And this is like a healthcare. Like people clearly find this compelling. And I think that might be one of the most interesting things about this technology adoption curve. Just a little bit more about Rime. I founded Rime with my 2 co-founders, Brooke and Aries. I was a PhD student at Stanford at the time. And we started by building a recording studio in San Francisco, and then just slowly but surely, continuing to this day, collecting a very large corpus of speech. Like the voices that you just heard, those are people who like grew up in San Francisco, right? And we can train models to replicate the characteristics of their voice with a high degree of fidelity. And what we learned when we started training models and working with customers is that, okay, why does a customer care about having a high quality voice? And the reason is, right, like if you're calling Domino's to order pizza and you hear the Gracie or George voice, you will hang up. That's end of story. Like it doesn't matter how smart the application is. It doesn't matter if it has connections to the POS and the CRM, such they know what your previous orders were and you wanted to repeat your last order. If you heard Gracie or George saying, "Hello, do you want to repeat your last order?" you will hang up. And so I think a big part of this is like people are like wanting something more, and what they're wanting is human connection, something that sounds relatable. And so it's pretty. I would say one of the most surprising things about my journey in working on Rime is that a team of 10, 12 people can train models that I'm guessing like hundreds of millions of people hear these voices every month. And for brands like Domino's and Carl's Jr., the drive-thru Carl's Jr., it's insane. And I think that just speaks to like the capability of AI modeling and the capacity for creativity that like a Google, Microsoft, and Amazon don't have in building these kind of data sets and training these kinds of models and understanding what customers are trying to do that goes over and above just right like I want a nice sounding voice. And that's that last 10%. It's like what do we hear now when we call Verizon or when we call AT&T? We hear not like what we heard 10, 15 years ago, but something like this.
Before we go ahead and connect you with someone, I just need to grab a bit of basic info. It's really just so we can make sure we match you with the best person to help out. So, to start, could I get your first and last name?
Yeah, it's John.
Thanks, John. Could you please share the phone number associated with your account?
Yeah, it's 206-639.
So, what brings you to call today? Is there an issue you're experiencing with your device or account?
Again, like, I don't know, I think what's most shocking about this call example, for what it's worth, is, and we've all heard the IVR system voice, the like really 20th century American broadcast standard, and we're at a point now where, right, the status quo used to be, you pick the one Google North American English accented voice, you put that into production. By the way, how did you pick that voice? It's the one that your customer hates the least. You put all 10 in front of them, you're like, what should you hate the least? And now we're at a point where I think like our technological capability is far surpassing our imagination. So like you can imagine, right? Like if an organization is receiving hundreds of thousands of phone calls a day, and I'm one of those 100,000 phone calls, the voice that I hear should be different than the one that any of you hear. And the reason for that, right, is like, I like different things. In the case of this customer, they put like 30 or 40 different Rime voices into production and then just measure the relative impact on the KPIs that they care about in this phone system. So for them, it was like, how much information can they gather in this phone call? If they can get 4 or 5 questions deep before the person's like, okay, I'm ready to talk to human, they're saving millions of dollars. And the reason for that, right, is like that human labor cost on the other end. You don't want someone asking, okay, what's your phone number like 5 times. I think at the end of the day, right, like what we're seeing live with the enterprise customers that we work with is like, we're at the very beginning of this. Like this today is like 1% of every time you call an enterprise today. But by next year, it'll be 1%. By the year after, it'll be 10%. Again, like where is this going? Full automation. So again, like 600 years from myth to something that could produce something that sounded like human voice. Another 200 years to software that could kind of sort of emulate 10 different sounds that the human vocal tract can produce, and then another 30 years to get to this. I mean, it's like, it's literally insane to me. And even still, there are a lot of what I would describe as last mile problems, right? So like, how do we get to 91%? I think that's like the relevant question. So like, imagine you're building an ordering application for Chipotle. And you're like, I'm gonna evaluate the space of early stage startups doing speech synthesis. And they seem really hot right now. Let's listen to one of Rime's competitors.
Chipotle is my favorite restaurant. Chipotle is my favorite restaurant.
Okay, I guarantee you, sorry, I almost said Chipotle. Chipotle, not gonna like that, right? Like, and I think there's still this like deep fundamental misunderstanding that like larger and larger models are gonna solve this problem. Here's another one.
Chipotle is my favorite food.
The combination, by the way, of like British plus like 50-year-old woman from Kansas pronouncing Chipotle is quite jarring. Maybe they say that in UK, right? Maybe it's actually. But for what it's worth, if you could generate it like multiple times, you hear a few different things. Ideally, there should be consistency. So again, like, what does the customer of Rime care about? They care about pronouncing Chipotle correctly. They care about, if you're building for Domino's, pronouncing Pizza Extravaganza correctly. They care about if you're building for, I'm gonna mess up. Might be Papa John's. Shakaroni, anyone know? Shakaroni correctly? And I think like this is, again, like a very underappreciated problem. I think the sad truth about getting to the 100% is that it might be impossible. And why I say that, right, is like with all this technological capability, if someone is building a calling application in healthcare, they're gonna message us and they're gonna be like, by the way, your model doesn't pronounce hydrochlorothiazide correctly, and this is a huge blocker. And they're gonna want a tool to fix that. I think like one of the things I've learned, and I don't know, I couldn't imagine what the compute budget for an OpenAI speech synthesis model is. I imagine it's tens of millions of dollars, like more money than we have raised. And at the same time, like they can't pronounce mixed crispy. And I think, again, there's this understanding you get when you're building these enterprise voice applications that when you're putting a demo in front of someone, 90% might be okay, but you gotta get to 91 or 92 before someone's gonna sign a deal. And that's really, I think, again, very, very underappreciated problem. And so the developer tooling that folks build into these models is something that really excites us. Like, could you build a capability into a model where you don't have to use the International Phonetic Alphabet to specify a pronunciation for a tassel, but rather you just record yourself reading a tassel, and then the model knows how to pronounce that going forward. Right? Like that's something that is very exciting to us because something that we've learned in working with customers is like the VP of engineering of a Wingstop is not managing a team of linguists. I can tell you that. But when mango habanero is mispronounced, someone's on the phone. I think, right, like, what happens when you solve that problem, though? I think something that people probably realize, right, is like, here's a map of the distribution for the generic term. Oh, I almost just said soda, for soda, but no, it's for a sweetened carbonated beverage. So like, if I grew up in Southern California, I'm saying soda. If you're from Seattle, you might be saying pop. I don't know. Apparently also, if you're from, where is this? What's the city? What's the city? No, I'm serious, what's the city here? St. Louis, you're saying soda as well. So I have more in common with them than I realized. I think this is a very underappreciated thing too. Like, is there going to be one model that people, one voice that if you're calling from St. Louis you hear, and one voice if you call from Los Angeles you hear? No, absolutely not. We've already done some pretty, I don't know, I mean, I think like fun work with some of these fast food customers that we have that shows, right, like when an African American English speaking caller hears an African American English voice and they're calling in Atlanta to Wingstop, the likelihood of that call succeeding increases by 50%. That is the likelihood of someone wanting to finish that order over the phone with the AI. This is like what really excites us. It's not like, how do we get a nice sounding model and how to pronounce it correctly, but how do we get a system that like people actually want to talk to? And I think for us, like, one thing we think about when it comes to that 100%, or at least it makes it like even possible for getting to 100%, is like, how can you take this schema of an outcome, right? Like, every customer we talk to has an understanding of what a successful interaction with a customer looks like, right? Did they successfully handle a customer support inquiry? Were they successfully able to take an order? Were they able to, in some cases, like qualify a lead in an outbound calling case? And so for us, it's like, in the same way that Google, in their infinite wisdom, A/B test 40 different colors of blue for the hyperlinks to measure which color of blue has the highest impact on click-through rate. By the way, that's how they get paid. One more ways that they get paid. Increasingly not. I think the same thing will be true of voice applications. And so we're really excited to get to 100%. And by the way, it's never going to happen. That's like the summary of the summary of the talk. And anyway, that's it. Thanks so much for listening to my talk. Thanks for having us. Let me know if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Uli. I think most interesting takeaway for myself is that how far personalization can go, right? If you're a business with 100 million calls a year, what's the impact of personalizing voices for each of the customers? And then measuring those metrics, right? I think that's going to be really fascinating in the next few years as we learn the degree of personalization. But that being said, as we look towards the future, I do want to invite our own Alan from Rasa here, who's going to talk to us about orchestration. And along those lines, probably the two biggest buzzwords in AI right now, which are going to be MCP and A to A.
I said I was going to talk about those. I'm not.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. You're throwing me around. All good. All good.
How do I connect? Actually?
Yes. Are you on the Wi-Fi?
Yeah.